welcome you all to the CUCFA UC-AFT Town Hall meeting to discuss the Senate Faculty Pledge to stand in solidarity with UC lecturers. Our lecturer colleagues are currently in negotiations with UCOP for a new contract. For the first time in over 20 years, and after 2 years of negotiations, lecturers have voted with an overwhelming majority of 96% to authorize a strike. CUCFA created the pledge, which many of you have signed. Thanks to all of you who have signed the pledge. If you haven't yet signed and are moved to do so after our meeting today, please do so. At the same time, CUCFA created FAQs for Senate faculty about their rights in supporting a possible strike. And both the pledge and the FAQs are posted in the chat. Now, thanks to all of you who showed up today to hear from UC-AFT representatives and get answers to your questions. Now for some introductions by everyone here to answer your questions. I'm Constance Penley, Professor of Film and Media Studies at UC Santa Barbara and President of the Council of UC Faculty Associations. And I turn it over to Debbie. Debbie Gould will be my co-moderator. And then we also welcome University Council AFT, Mia McMcIver and Katie Rodger. So please introduce yourselves. Start, Debbie.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Debbie Gould. I'm an associate professor in sociology at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm the co-chair of the Santa Cruz Faculty Association, the SCFA. I'm going to turn it over to Mia.
Hi everyone, it's great to see you. I'm so happy to be with you today. Thank you for being here. It's an act of solidarity in and of itself. My name is Mia McMcIver. I teach as a lecturer at UCLA. I'm president of UC-AFT and chief negotiator for our faculty bargaining unit. Katie?
Hey everyone, my name is Katie Rodger. I am a lecturer in the University Writing Program at UC Davis, and I am also the chapter co-chair for the Unit 18 lecturers at Davis.
Great, thank you all. So Debbie and I are going to make some brief remarks about why CUCFA thinks it's important for Senate faculties to support our lecturer colleagues and to give some national context to this campaign. Then Mia and Katie will fill us in on the issues that led up to UC calling for a possible strike. We're going to keep our remarks short to leave as much time as possible in our short hour. We hope it'll be just an hour for your questions. When we get to the questions, please raise your hand if you have a question for any of us. And you may also put a question in the chat, but you'll have a better chance of getting your question answered if you raise your hand. Debbie.
Okay, thanks, Constance. I wanted to say a bit about why CUCFA, which is the Council of UC Faculty Associations, why CUCFA is standing in solidarity and invites all Senate faculty to stand in solidarity with our lecturer colleagues as they negotiate a new contract. And so first and foremost, they are our colleagues. We share the same training, experience, and skills, as well as the same workplace. And we believe that they should be fairly compensated for all of their work. They should have job stability and a fair and consistent process of evaluation of their work. Second, the UC system is utterly dependent on our lecturer colleagues who teach 1/3 of undergraduate credit hours across the system, and on some campuses, they teach more than a half of the credit hours. I know that my department would not be able to mount its curriculum without the valuable labor of lecturers, and I think that's true for many departments across the system. They are essential workers, their labor is valuable, and their contract should reflect that. Third, I would say that the cost-cutting logic that keeps their median annual salary between extremely low income and very low income across California, and in fact, below extremely low income in many places, including San Francisco, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Santa Cruz. That cost-cutting logic is the same logic that starves our academic departments and programs, that tells us to do more with less, and that suggests that the University of California can provide a high-quality education on the cheap. So standing with the lecturers is one way for us to fight that logic. Fourth, and related to everything that I've said already, is that the quality of undergraduate education at the University of California really depends on all of its faculty, including its lecturers. And our lecturer colleagues' very precarious working conditions are our students' learning conditions, as everyone says. So those are some of the reasons why we're standing in solidarity with them. And in addition to standing in solidarity with the lecturers, CUCFA also thinks that it's important to inform Senate faculty of our rights in the event of a UC-AFT strike. And so to that end, we developed this FAQ that Connie mentioned, and someone I think is going to drop a link to that in the chat. One thing I would just want to point out, which is that respecting a picket line is not the same as engaging directly in a strike. Senate faculty, like all university employees, are covered under HERA, which is the Higher Education Employment Relations Act. All university employees have a right to follow their individual conscience and respect a picket line established by other university employees. We also have individual free speech rights that provide additional protections. And finally, I just want to thank all of those of you who have signed the Pledge of Solidarity. Over 300 Senate faculty from across the system have already signed. We invite every Senate faculty member to sign and to encourage your colleagues to sign. And as Connie, I think maybe said, leaving a comment on CUCFA's website is not the same as signing the pledge. You actually have to click on the pledge to sign it. But welcome everybody. And I'm really happy to have Mia and Katie here who can tell us kind of what's been going on with negotiations, what their working conditions are like, and how we can be in solidarity. But actually, I'm turning it back to you, Constance, to tell us a little bit about the national picture.
Yes, we wanted everyone to know the national context for why we're joining with UC-AFT in their efforts to gain fair and just working conditions. UC Faculty Association and other UC Senate faculty members, some of whom are here, are working with an impressive number of labor and higher education reform organizations as part of a broad vision to make our colleagues and universities accessible to all. Academic workers across the country are organizing to move Congress to reinvest in and restructure higher ed. And just some of these organizations that we are now working with intensely on a weekly basis, especially as we move toward all of the writing of the reconciliation legislation. It's all happening this fall. Some of these, and I'm happy to say that some of the people involved and some of the leaders are here on our call. Some of these higher ed reform campaigns and organizations that center labor relations, labor rights, include, and these are all going to be in the chat, the AAUP-AFT New Deal for Higher Education, Higher Education Labor United, Scholars for a New Deal for Higher Education, and legislative efforts including College for All, the Sanders and Jayapal bill, College for All, and our own project to reclaim the master plan for California higher education. Again, all those links are in the chat. And again, all of these efforts involve higher ed reform calls that center labor. Okay, and I'm sure we'll hear more about some of this from our UC-AFT colleagues. And now, let me turn it over to Mia McMcIver and Katie Rodger to fill us in on all this.
Thanks. And Constance and Debbie, I just want to thank you for your steadfast leadership and your steadfast solidarity during this very hard-fought campaign. We prepared a brief overview of our campaign that should set us up for a fully informed conversation. I have some slides that should take about 15 to 20 minutes here to talk about what has happened over the last 2.5 years. And as you might imagine, in a campaign of this length, many things have happened. And so I really say that this is really just touching the surface. There's a lot to talk about, and really look forward to your questions in just a few minutes. All right, so I wanted to start just by sharing Katie's and my contact information. You can see our email addresses there. Please do reach out with any questions that don't get answered today or that occur to you after today. So, quick overview of who lecturers are. At the UC, there are about 6,800 contingent teaching faculty, also known as Unit 18 lecturers. The Unit 18 is an internal label to refer to our collective bargaining unit. As Debbie already said, we conduct about 1/3 of all undergraduate teaching system-wide. We also have some responsibility for graduate and professional education. So there are law lecturers and business lecturers and nursing lecturers and dentistry lecturers. I myself teach a graduate seminar every spring. We work in nearly every department, teaching everything from art history to zoology. Most of us have terminal degrees, and when we're first hired, we have credentials that are comparable to tenure-track faculty in our fields. The vast majority of us are hired on short-term, part-time contracts, and most are unbenefited. And we have two big categories of lecturers: pre-6 or pre-continuing lecturers in their first 18 quarters or 12 semesters, and then continuing lecturers who have passed a rigorous performance review after those 18 quarters or 12 semesters and have an indefinite appointment where they don't need to reapply for their own job continually. So pre-6 lecturers are extremely precarious, are vulnerable to arbitrary disemployment at virtually any time in those 18 quarters and 12 semesters in between their appointments. Continuing lecturers have a lot more stability, but only about 8% of lecturers have attained continuing status since 2003. And I think it's really important to note here that thanks to the leadership of very courageous lecturers and UC-AFT leaders in the past, the reason we have continuing appointments is that we went on strike in 2002 in order to win them. So we see this campaign really as continuous with that campaign in 2002. And continuing those efforts to bring dignity, respect, and stability to teaching jobs at the UC. So our contract campaign goals were set by our members. We had the largest member engagement outreach effort in UC-AFT history in late 2018 and early 2019 before bargaining began. And this is what lecturers told us that they needed: fair and transparent evaluation and rehiring practices. And that's probably the one that you hear about the most, but there are two other priorities that are equally essential: consistent and enforceable workload standards, compensation that rises above low-income thresholds and reflects our essential role in our university, and then some softer big picture things, a commitment from President Drake's administration to invest in the UC's teaching mission. And in just a moment, I'll talk about why now is the moment for that. Maintenance of high quality education for our students, especially in this pandemic era, when it was lecturers teaching 9 courses a year who picked up and moved our university online last year and kept educational continuity going. And then finally, what always turns up as our members' first concern when we talk with them, when we survey them: respect, dignity, resources, and support. So here are the problems we need to solve. Problem number one is profound job instability. Prior to COVID, about 1,600 pre-continuing teaching faculty were laid off every year. In summer 2020, that number rose to about 2,000. The current data that's been transmitted to us from the UC Office of the President says that currently there are 2,200 teaching faculty who were laid off in summer of 2021, meaning these were folks who were on payroll last year and who are not on payroll for this fall. We've also seen recent layoffs of continuing faculty on multiple campuses. And statistically speaking, most lecturers teach at the UC for a year or less. The average lecturer gets to teach for less than 2 years, and there's very little access to continuing appointments. And we know from conducting exit interviews that people leave employment at the UC for a lot of different reasons. In the majority of cases, people say they would accept future appointments if they were offered.
I got kicked out.
Really?
I mean,
Oh, Jesus. We'll have a pull chair.
yeah.
So, oh, that I can't hear now. So.
And people who have, please mute yourself if you're not wanting to be heard.
Depending on how you look at it, the University of California is either the biggest employer or the third biggest employer in the state of California. And that means that the UC has an enormous responsibility to its workers and to all the people of California for providing good jobs with sustaining wages and benefits and contributing to the solidity and the stability of the middle class in California. I say that UCOP, is, when it comes to lecturers, is not an employer, but a disemployer. If you look at the 5-year turnover rate, about 75% of lecturers, or about 3/4, who were hired in 2015, 2016, were not on payroll during the last academic year. And so what this means is that the lecturer who stands in front of their class, in front of their students, as many of us are preparing to do this week, and many of us have already done at Berkeley and Merced, stands in front of a class of first-year students and says, "Welcome to college," and invites those students into our university. Statistically speaking, that lecturer will no longer have a job at the UC by the time that those students graduate. So what do we mean when we talk about increased job stability? Well, we have made a number of proposals to President Drake's administration. We are flexible in terms of the actual deal that we settle on. What we do need, and the way we get there are lots of different routes to getting there. What we do need is some assurance that available classes will be offered to qualified faculty in good standing who have demonstrated that they're capable instructors before new candidates are recruited. I just want to put special emphasis on that available classes there. We're not proposing a strict seniority system. We're not proposing any right to employment. If classes are not available, that can be extremely difficult, but can also be legitimate. So when classes are available for lecturer faculty, and those lecturer faculty are qualified to teach them, have passed a performance review, they should have first crack at that work before new lecturers are hired. We're demanding that longer service to our university will result in longer appointments for pre-continuing faculty. Happy to say that's something that we've made progress on at the bargaining table, and hope to ultimately settle the contract with that progress. That all lecturers' academic performance will be assessed through fair and transparent and consistent review processes. It is certainly the industry standard for all faculty, including contingent faculty, to receive performance reviews. Most lecturers are never, most pre-6 lecturers are never reviewed, never have their teaching observed. That's something that we're looking to change. And finally, we want promotions to senior lecturer to be regularly and widely accessible, because for our continuing appointee members, they have a real hunger and a real need and a real drive for continued professional growth and development, in the middle of their careers, later in their careers teaching at the UC. So all of these elements must go together for real job stability. All right, so we focus a lot on job stability, but workload inconsistencies and compensation are two other big priorities. And here are the problems that we need to solve when it comes to workload. Similar or identical courses in different departments or at different campuses are valued differently when it comes to pay for those courses. Our current contract has only a vague definition of an instructional workload credit and an opaque or non-existent process for determining how those instructional workload credits are allocated. Our current contract does not offer an opportunity to make adjustments for workload creep. If the course that you're teaching has maybe the enrollment cap has risen and risen and risen over the past several years, there should be an opportunity to reconsider the workload valuation of that course. And no enforceability for workload misalignments. Lecturers conduct service and professional development work on a largely volunteer and unpaid basis. And lecturers at UC Santa Cruz are particularly disadvantaged for a variety of reasons when it comes to workload. So we're looking to solve some Santa Cruz specific issues as well. Right, when it comes to compensation, here is what we need to improve. And you heard Debbie refer to this before. The annual median UC lecturer salary hovers somewhere between $18,000 and $20,000 per year. It's an appallingly low number. And that's partly due to the fact that there's pervasive part-time and fragmentary work, right? When you're only on payroll for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, you don't qualify, you're not eligible for the contractually mandated raises that lecturers have fought for and won in the past. So those salaries are artificially suppressed, kept artificially low by pervasively fragmented work and short-term work. At the same time, our full-time starting salary is classified by the Housing and Department of Housing and Urban Development as low income for a one-person household at 6 of the 9 campuses. And it's classified as very low income for a 4-person household at those same 6 campuses. When adjusted for cost of living, competitor salaries are much higher. At the University of Michigan, for example, the starting salary for a lecturer is $51,000. $51,000 in Ann Arbor equates to about $115,000 in Berkeley, California. Now, our salary proposals don't quite aim to raise the compensation to that level, but you can see the disparity and you can see how the University of California is being outflanked by other public 4-year research institutions. And a corollary of the low appointment percentages, the low compensation, is exclusion from health insurance, retirement benefits, and family and childcare accommodations. So when we take a step back and put it all together, the problem that we need to solve is one of structural discrimination. UC-AFT faculty are more likely than tenure-track faculty to be women and faculty of color, and the current system directly undermines President Drake's avowed equity goals. I can speak from personal experience. Other lecturers will testify that we regularly experience disrespect, contempt, exclusion, a lack of the necessary support and resources. And generally, we struggle for dignified working conditions. And Debbie, I was really happy to hear you talk about how we are united, Senate and non-Senate faculty united in teaching, united through our workplaces, united through our students. As historically underrepresented students fight for and win access to our university, we have to question what kind of education are they getting access to? And is it one where investment in teaching and learning is on par with what previous generations have enjoyed? All right, the good news is that our goals are realistic and feasible, and we know because they already exist at other institutions. Contingent faculty are reviewed annually at most 4-year colleges and universities, including most of the Comp 8 group that UCOP uses to compare itself to. Reemployment preferences of the type we're demanding work well to balance labor management interests at all California community colleges and every CSU campus. And I'll just say a word about our current financial context. In the last year and a half, the University of California has received more than $2 billion in federal COVID relief funds. There's been a historic increase in ongoing state funding from the California governor and legislature. And just in July, forever tuition hikes were approved by the regents, explicitly justified on the basis of reducing class sizes, reinvesting in faculty, and supporting diversity and equity. And that's us. That is lecturers. We are the ones teaching the giant classes. We need reinvestment. We are diverse, a diverse workforce striving for equity. So if the funds raised from students and their families is not being channeled directly into supporting classroom instruction, then those dollars are potentially being mismanaged and those promises are being broken. Finally, inflation is running at 5.3%. So in addition to the low salaries that you heard about earlier, our members are deeply concerned that, President Drake's negotiators are proposing compensation that will not keep up with inflation and will lead to a pay cut in real terms. All right, I'm going to just here briefly talk about our bargaining timeline to give you an overview, and then Katie is going to talk about our organizing efforts in the last 2.5 years. Bargaining began in April of 2019. Our contract expired with little to no movement from the Office of the President in January of 2020. In April of 2020, President Drake's negotiators withdrew most of their proposals and wanted to revert back to current contract language, basically erasing all of the work that we had done for the past year. We were really resilient. We persisted through the summer, and in a reversal, they indicated an interest in bargaining a 5-year contract last fall. In some respects, this is good news. We're also very keenly aware that in the world of labor relations, a 5-year contract is a very, very long contract. An average or typical collective bargaining agreement usually lasts for about 3 years, and that's because, you know, as both sides are looking into the future, that's about as far in advance as we can predict. So a 5-year contract is a very long contract that should drastically and dramatically improve working conditions to merit the length of that contract, because the longer the contract, the longer we waive our collective bargaining rights. In May of 2021, we asked the Public Employment Relations Board, the California state agency that oversees our employment, to determine that we had reached impasse, meaning both parties to the negotiations had no more room to move. PERB agreed with us, and we started the mediation process with our state-sponsored mediator, and we've been engaging in mediation for the last 2 months. Katie now is going to talk about the actions, the mobilizations, the organizing that this campaign is rooted in.
Thanks so much, Mia, and thank you all. I want to also just say, by way of beginning, that I recognize a lot of names that have popped in here today as people who have joined us in our bargaining Zooms over the last year. So as Mia pointed out in her final slide, this has been a long campaign for us. It began pre-COVID. And I think that, you know, as with many things in the last 18 months, we had no idea what we were in for as 2020, the spring of 2020 dawned on us all. So prior to that, however, prior to the pandemic, I would say that our campaign was very strong, and we had literally thousands of people engaging with our sunshining, which was the sort of opening discussion of what aspects of our contract we wanted to bargain. Mia showed on a slide, you know, that lecturers were actively engaged in setting the priorities for bargaining. And as we continued through the first, say, year of the campaign, I would say that momentum was gaining at in-person bargaining sessions. We had lots of lecturers coming to watch how negotiations progressed. We had student allies, Senate allies. And I do think that we were starting to mount some serious pressure on the university. When COVID shut us all down, or at least put us all into the Zoom room that we are still in, things got complicated. When the university sort of pivoted to a short-term contract, lecturers, I think, were really shocked and disappointed in the administration. Our team rolled with that and tried to really focus in on job security, which made sense given the pandemic was making everybody nervous about the possible future of their jobs. But we ended up, continuing to increase pressure in spite of COVID and some of the limitations on our organizing. So people have been engaged in an online picket where we had hundreds of lecturers and allies turn out in digital form to support the campaign. We've written letters to the EVCs and postcards to President Drake. We've had car caravans across campuses around the state, visiting EVCs, visiting chancellors' residences, and people have really made every effort to show up in the most visible and engaged ways that they can. One of the things, though, that I wanted to just point out was in that final slide that Mia showed of our timeline, as she mentioned, in the summers of 2020 and 2021, as many as 4,000 lecturers were churned out. So from where we began and where we are now, we have lost many people who were actively invested in this contract campaign. We have the sort of added work as organizers of trying to get those who've been coming into the university as Unit 18 faculty up to speed on this campaign. It can be at times really difficult. But it can be really invigorating to see people coming into the UC system, enthusiastic for being part of this system, and realize that there's a lot to fight for and a lot at stake. I think we've got, yeah, someone's got a live mic. Thank you. And so ultimately, as we worked through the pandemic and organized through the pandemic, things really, I think, heated up for us in spring of 2021. You may be aware, you can see it in our screen, our Zoom backgrounds, that ultimately we conducted a strike authorization vote among our members, had turnout and a positive resounding yes to authorize our table team to strike, to call a strike if necessary. And really, to me, the most important sort of message in this is that this is a very long, sort of long fought campaign so far. And many of us feel strongly that a strike will be the last resort. We have an informational picket planned in October that we hope will be a very strong showing of our own strength and the solidarity of our allies. And at any time we could settle if management wants to come back to the table with a reasonable and strong offer. So I'll kind of wind down there, but organizing is absolutely right now our priority, and we really appreciate having all of the Senate support. Thanks.
So a quick look ahead at the fall and how you can act in solidarity. As you've already heard and seen, you can sign the CUCFA pledge, which was very thoughtfully developed. You can attend a faculty association meeting. You can give public comment to the regents next week, September 28th, 29th, and 30th. 1 minute phone call to say, this is my name. This is what I teach. I stand in solidarity for the lecturers and call on President Drake to settle a fair contract now. We would love to have you attend our September contractor strike rally next week. It's next Wednesday at 11 a.m. at the UCOP offices in Oakland. And we ask you to join our informational pickets on October 13th and 14th on your home campus. The more successful these actions are in demonstrating broad and deep support for our very reasonable and feasible demands, the less likely it is that we will be forced to strike in order to win the improvements that we need to see. And if necessary, if a strike is the only way to accomplish that, and I have to say, it would be absurd to be forced to strike to win the right to have a performance evaluation. If that is necessary, then we will ask you to respect our picket lines. And I know that the Faculty Association leaders have lots of ideas and have shared them in the pledge for how to do that and how to be in solidarity.
Thank you, Mia and Katie. That was just so fabulous to be able to get all that necessary information. We're now going to go to the Q&A. And should we take that first question that came into the chat first or go right to the hands raised?
Why don't I answer Kevin Karplas's excellent question that's in the chat, and then from here on out, rather than putting questions in the chat, if people can use the raise hand function, then we can, keep it a stack that way. Is that okay, Connie?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Kevin asked, Kevin, who is here at UC Santa Cruz in the chat, I'm just going to read it from the chat. During the term, the larger question is, how does the SCFA MOU strike clause affect UCSC faculty? We're the only faculty association in the UC system that has collective bargaining rights. As Kevin says, during the term of this memorandum of understanding, the association will not instigate, engage in, or support in any way any strike, work stoppage, concerted slowdown, or other concerted refusal to perform work or provide service at the customary level over any matters within the scope of representation and or consultation as provided by section blah blah of HERA. And if any such strike, work stoppage, concerted slowdown, or other concerted refusal to perform services should occur, the association, meaning the SCFA, agrees to make all reasonable efforts to discourage and bring an end to such activity. So it's a great question, Kevin. And the answer is that SCFA let that MOU expire back in the 90s. I wasn't here yet. We let it expire so that we would not be bound by that no strike clause or all of that clause that I just read. But we are still the collective bargaining unit on this campus for Senate faculty, and UCSC still must bargain with us locally over local issues, but we are no longer bound by, and those kinds of no strike clauses are now pretty common and they're really problematic. And it's why we let our MOU expire.
Thank you. I hadn't realized it had expired.
Thanks for the question, Kevin.
And we have Ben Reed, who has a hand up.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering if you could explain in a little bit more detail what the union is negotiating for. We got a sense of the overall goals, but I'm wondering what the sticking points are, and in particular, what it would mean for fair and transparent evaluation and rehiring practices. So, when in my department, for instance, when we're hiring lecturers, what would we be doing that we're not doing now in terms of the way that we approach the hiring of lecturers? I have some sense of this from conversations I've had with lecturer colleagues, but I'd really love to hear it from you.
Yeah, great question. So I'll say that practices in different departments vary widely, right? So without knowing exactly how things work in your department, I'll say just generally, what we're looking for is for rehiring decisions to be performance-based and merit-based, right? Because what we see a lot of is a lot of arbitrary separations and terminations and hiring of lecturers to replace those who have been arbitrarily let go. So what that means is assessing the performance of the people who have been teaching, and then having that assessment inform the decision about whether to rehire them or not. And that does happen to a limited extent in some places in this university, but it does not happen widely. And so we really want to take those best practices that we see and have them be consistent system-wide, so that there is a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, that's on the way towards answering it. I guess I wonder, and specifically sort of what would it mean in terms of, you know, like, let's say a department hired a lecturer, as we often do, to teach one class in one quarter. Like, at what point would we have continuing obligations to give that person priority in future cycles?
So that's a matter of negotiation. And as I said, we have, there are many routes to getting there, right? What's important is that we do get there. And so the nitty gritty details about, you know, what's that timing going to look like? What's that process going to look like? We have made multiple proposals on that, all of which have been rejected. So, you know, I think we will see a reasonable compromise agreement. We'll recognize it when we see it, right? And we haven't seen it yet. I want to address the question of what, you know, you hire someone to teach one class for one quarter, and I'm having some unstable internet here, but, you know, at what point do you have an obligation to them? Well, I think it depends a lot on the reason why you hired them, you know, for such an extremely short amount of time. All of our proposals recognize that there is legitimate short-term work for lecturers at the university, right? At the same time, when you view it holistically, the teaching that we do is ongoing, the demand for our work is ongoing, the student body is increasing, the enrollments are increasing. There are crises in the number of undergraduate classes that are offered at Santa Barbara and other campuses, right? So we know that the demand for our work exists and persists. That person that you hire to teach one class for one quarter may well be qualified to teach something else that your department needs the next year. That's for you to decide. If they are qualified to teach something else that your department needs, our demand is that you assess them and you consider them first before you look for other external candidates.
Thank you.
And Christine Hunfeld has a hand up.
Yeah, I was a little bit wondering what the arguments on the other side, Rita Drake, are to not accepting a very reasonable proposition on your side. And then the other concern I have is a little bit, I mean, why should you drop the research component from your petitions? And I suspect that one of the reasons to keep salaries low is that you are not engaging in research. So why not ask for some funding additional when you talk about resources to allow you to do research in research universities? Just
Great question. And many of our members conduct research and have their own research agenda and do it on an entirely volunteer and unpaid basis, right? So those publications redound to the reputation and prestige of our university, even if our members don't get paid for it and don't get credit for it. UC management, President Drake's administration, insists on keeping a very strict boundary in terms of what lecturers are assigned to do. And our members, one of the things our members have demanded this bargaining cycle is the ability to be principal investigators on grants, right? This is a research university. We conduct research. We teach our students how to do research. We guide our students in doing research. Research and teaching are inseparable. This is very difficult to get through to labor relations and human relations executives and lawyers who are not themselves teachers, who are not themselves faculty. Those are the people that we negotiate with at the bargaining table. So that's the second part of your question. And forgive me, can you repeat the first part?
the first part had to do with the reactions, the official reactions, and why people like Drake cannot see how justified your petitions are and your claims are. I mean, they sound so straightforward from all your presentation that it is hard for me to find an argument not to grant these petitions. No? So what is he saying to you?
So I'd like to ask other Senate faculty who have attended bargaining maybe to weigh in on what they've heard. And I think that's a great question. I think that would be a great public comment at the Regents meeting next week. And I think that is the question that we all need to be putting to President Drake and to his representatives now. I will say in general, the answer is it's about power. And it doesn't have to do with the content of our demands. It has to do with the way that agreeing to anything that UC-AFT puts on the table is perceived within the University of California labor ecosystem as a loss of power.
I would like to weigh in on that as someone who has observed many of these bargaining sessions. And I'm also speaking in response to Bruce Lipshitz's similar remark in the chat about his bafflement that given, why is there this adversarial situation, on the part of UC? And at the very first, it was an in-person bargaining session I went to, I felt so naive and ignorant, about what was going on with our university in relation to the lecturers. I certainly learned this the hard way. I was staggered by the level of disrespect, contempt, and derision toward the bargaining lecturers on the part of the UCOP labor relations. It is just staggering. It's such an education. I know that many of you now, Senate faculty, have started attending the bargaining sessions. I mean, there was one where we had up to 100 Senate faculty, and that is so eye-opening. I would encourage any of you to go to see this and then comment both in those meetings and at Regents meetings, for example, on why our teaching colleagues should be shown such disrespect and disregard. And I think we have up next, the next hand that I see is, let's see, Eileen Boris.
Yeah. I've been having some trouble with my internet, so I don't know whether you covered this earlier, because I lost you all for a bit. But I was wondering to what extent the university's failure, not wanting to increase in the number of FTEs to create more positions that lead to potential for security of employment has to do with this, for the corporate flexibility. And I'm wondering to what extent the demand for more paths to full-time positions is part of the equation, and their reluctance. So they tell us when departments are asking for FTE, full-time equivalencies, well, if you put it towards a potential for security employment lecturer for A, B, C, and D, then you can't have a position for an assistant professor. So I'm wondering to what extent that has been part of the discussion of corporate flexibility.
Yeah, great questions, Eileen. President Drake's negotiators also want there to be very, very strict non-crossable boundaries between Unit 18 lecturer positions and lecturer with security of employment positions. So there is no channel, there is no pathway currently from one to the other. Based on what we've heard at the bargaining table, that's not something that they would be agreeable to at any time in the future. But we believe that our proposals would not just lead to more people having job stability year to year, but would also indirectly increase individuals' appointment percentages, hopefully bringing people up to benefits eligibility in some cases. And while that's not the primary goal of our proposals, I think that is somewhat it would be a corollary. I think that in recent years, we've seen an expansion of lecturer with security of employment positions, sometimes called teaching professor positions. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with that, the increased, the higher wages, the increased stability, the professional pathways that come along with that are all good things. But within the labor ecology of the university, it's not necessary to create new job titles to provide those things. It's simply necessary to invest in the workers who are already here, and that is Unit 18 lecturers. There's nothing stopping President Drake's administration from bringing that same level of stability, that same level of support to Unit 18 lecturers.
Yes. Thank you. And I believe Harold Marcusa is next.
Hi, I just wanted to second what you said before, Connie. I also attended the bargaining session that occurred here at UCSB a good year and a half ago, and just utter bafflement at the intransigence of the UCOF negotiators. It seemed to me, my impression was that they had been given a directive not to yield at all an inch of ground in their existing position, and they were just going to stick by it no matter how rational, how cogent the arguments were on the side of the lecturers. And it was really shameful. I mean, I felt that my university administration was bargaining in bad faith against the interests of this institution. And I mean, it's just abominable to have to watch that. So this strike is so much more than justified, in my opinion, that we faculty really need to support our lecturers in it.
Thank you, Harold. And Nelson Lichtenstein. Nelson, are you there?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, I was just struck by one of the comments made that the UCOF was resistant in allowing lecturers to be principal investigators, and it just seems to me that most lecturers who, and you said this earlier, basically when they get jobs, their qualifications and accomplishments are not all that different from people who are ladder faculty. I mean, I've had this experience in my career that it basically, it's a kind of a flip of the coin whether you get these jobs or not, and which ones you get. It's not the question of your accomplishments is sometimes just a question of luck and being in the right place at the right time. But the university is so determined to create a subordinate category here that it's cutting its own, undercutting its own purpose. That is in eroding and the research and that point about teaching and research are inextricably together. They are, and it's willing to sort of to undercut the purpose of the university in order to continue to create this subordinate category, which I think in many ways is artificial when it comes to the academic purpose of the university. So it doesn't surprise me that they are intransigent on those kind of questions. But I do think that is actually one of the issues that the faculty is most supportive of. They see that the lecturers are in fact researchers, academics, professors of high quality, and that should be pushed forward. And I think it's in the best interest of the university to do that.
Thank you, Nelson.
If I could jump in for just a second in response to that, I just want to say thank you for that comment. I happen to be a lecturer who was told I could not be a PI on a grant. And so one of my Senate colleagues in my department is the PI on a grant that I do, basically I run. And for many years, he was the department chair and had zero time to put, he didn't do anything on it really. And I mean, by agreement, he's a great person. This was all very, very mutually agreed upon, but it's ludicrous because when it comes to, running the grant through the financial channels, I have no authority. Everything has to go through him, even if there were times that he didn't have the time to administer the grant. So, I mean, I would, in frustration, just think, how can the university think this is worthwhile? It was such a time waste for so many people, so much time lost, so much money lost. Frankly, if they just let me run the grant as the PI, the grant would have had more money for it because they won't pay me. I am a full-time lecturer. They won't pay me a dime over my full-time wage, even if it came in through a grant. So the money that was for my salary couldn't even be included in the grant for the university and had to be paid as an outside contractor. I mean, it was just ludicrous. So I do want to just say all of that and also just add that it is insulting, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I have a PhD, I'm a capable person, and I feel that it's very infantilizing to be told that I can't do this work. And so I do respect my colleague and I'm grateful that he agreed to do this. But it's in my mind, it's one of the most professionally insulting things that I've experienced as a lecturer in the UC.
And as we're getting close to wrapping up here, I do just want to circle back around to the question of, why haven't President Drake's negotiators been motivated to reach some reasonable compromise here yet? And the answer, quite simply, is that not enough people are demanding it yet. And I just really want to close with the idea that you have the right and the academic freedom and the power to hold the university administration accountable. And when something seems out of whack to you, to say this does not align with our goals or our values. And your voices are going to be essential in bringing this campaign to a close. I am very optimistic that we are going to win what we need. The question is just how long it's going to take. And with your solidarity, it will probably shorten the struggle.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the conversation that everybody, all the questions. And before we end, I do want to invite any Senate faculty who are skeptical to raise questions, because this is an excellent opportunity. Mia and Katie are very familiar with, dealing with Senate faculty who object to certain things, and they have really very thoughtful replies. And so I just want to invite people to ask, there are reasons why Senate faculty might not support this. And this is a great opportunity to raise some of those issues and have them answered. And so before we close out, since no one, Andy, go ahead.
Hi, my camera is not working and I apologize for that. And skeptical doesn't really quite describe me. I think the presentation that Mia gave, I think the argument is overwhelming in the case of lecturers who have been doing it for more than 1 or 2 quarters and are hoping to make a career with fair and reasonable working conditions. But I can anticipate an argument on behalf of some of my colleagues that I suspect you may have heard before. So let me put it to you. All Unit 18 lecturers are not created equal. There are people hoping to do it for a long time. And then there are people who deliberately set out to do it for a very short time. For example, a recent graduate whom a department hires in the spirit of, in a sense, continuing their education. Maybe they even have something lined up the next fall. So they're only looking for something for, say, 1 or 2 quarters to begin with. Who are these lecturer union people coming along who want to impose a one-size-fits-all solution on all Unit 18 lecturers when we deeply cherish the flexibility that might reduce our willingness to hire those recent graduates in the first place?
Thanks, Andy. It's a question I hear very often, and I think the response is multifaceted. The first is that there will always be people who get into a lecturer position and then move on, right? That's for different reasons. What we're looking to make sure is that nobody is forced out arbitrarily if they want to continue teaching. I think that, you know, with the state of the academy today and the drastic lack of tenure track jobs, when we talk about contingent lecturer faculty moving on to other jobs, it's typically to other contingent jobs. So there are certainly people who move from being a Unit 18 lecturer into tenure track jobs, but a lot go on to postdocs, a lot go on to VAPs. People hop from one-year gigs to one-year gigs. Teaching UC students should not be a gig. It's too important. And a Unit 18 lecturer is not a training position. It's actually not an extension of graduate education. It is a faculty position. We are demanding that President Drake's administration invest in teaching faculty at the point of hire and hire lecturers based on qualifications, not on any other kind of patronage that really could perpetuate some disturbing patterns in terms of discrimination and bias as well. So not everyone who comes into a Unit 18 lecturer position wants to stay long-term. All of our proposals recognize that. And again, the issue that we're trying to solve is that the temporary and part-time nature of a teaching faculty position, where maybe a lecturer is, you know, stepping in for a Senate faculty member on leave or sabbatical, that exception has become the rule and is now applied to lecturers in a wide variety of situations who do not want to be temporarily employed. So there's really an element here of reversing that creep where those legitimate temporary needs have come to expand to virtually our entire teaching workforce.
And we have a hand up from Shiti.
Yeah. Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Now we can't hear you.
Now we can't hear.
If you want, you could put your question in the chat, perhaps.
It looks like the chat has been disabled.
No, it is not.
It is disabled, it says so.
It says that it's disabled for me. Oh, there we go. It's back.
Okay.
Now it's back.
While we're waiting for Shiti perhaps to put a question into the chat, we have a hand from Charles Bazerman.
Hi. Mine's not skeptical. There's something I just want to understand a little bit more. So on this campus, but on all the UC campuses, there are large numbers of lecturers within the writing programs. They are organized differently across the campuses. On our campus, they have some degree of internal self-governance and some status, and they are an independent unit on campus. Other campuses, they are subunits within other governing, within departments or other programs. On some campuses, they seem to be kicked around. They're sort of nowhere, but under random control of different departments and people. To what the discussions you've been presenting, of course, the proposals really have to do with the broad range of Unit 18s, some of which are hired by departments in which they are not a substantial number. So I would like to understand, is this negotiation speaking to the situation of these larger units, which are comprised mostly of Unit 18s, to increase their self-governance, their professionalism, their support for their professional development and research within at least the area of writing? Research, program development, professional development are a very important part, and these are understood as career commitments. So could you speak a little bit to those kinds of concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. You're pointing to a challenge of negotiating a system-wide contract, which is that different campuses have different cultures and different departments have different practices. And so there are a lot of things that we would like to improve. And the reaction we often get from the Office of the President is, we're not writing something into the contract just for one department or just for one campus. So, you know, there are different ways to get at different problems, but you're right that especially in writing and foreign language departments that are staffed primarily by lecturers, there do tend to be higher rates of job stability and higher you know, more possibility for career paths. At the same time, these programs do sometimes themselves arbitrarily separate their faculty without any due process. And other times in these programs, and this is my own personal situation that I was in as a lecturer at UC Irvine in the composition program there, where I was never able to get a full-time appointment, and you know the work was not sustainable. I was told every summer through a whisper network that I was about to be fired. You know, people move on from those programs when they don't have the support and the resources that they need also. So while there are a lot of things that we would like to see replicated from writing programs, from foreign language departments, and brought to other departments, it's true that even in these places that are heavily and densely staffed by lecturers, there are some troubling issues. And it engages, as you point to, the question of service and professional development work, right? I teach in UCLA writing programs now, and we have a lot of committee work within our program, and none of that is compensated. It's the price for that autonomy and self-governance is a whole lot of unpaid labor, which it shouldn't be that there shouldn't be a trade-off there. I want to address something that I saw in the chat about state and federal funding and the importance of increasing that. That's why UC-AFT works with these national coalitions that Constance laid out and that CUCFA is working with as well. It's also not enough, right? We have to be able to say, when those increases in state and federal funding come, this is how we want to spend the money, because it doesn't get funneled naturally to all the right places when that funding increases. So even during the good times, when the university is flush, it requires a lot of advocacy to make sure that money is managed well.
I'm so glad that you made that point, Mia. I think we have one other question here in chat from Christine Hunenfeld, which is, do lecturers have representation within each of the academic senates in the UC system?
I'm having unstable internet, but the answer is very short, no.
This is something you should strive for. I mean, this is where the battle begins. Wouldn't you agree?
It's very complicated. There are a lot of members who do agree with you. It's also true that under California state law, even though we have probably the best labor law in the country as far as being public employees, if we were to join the Senate right now, we would lose our union representation. So it's very complicated.
Yeah, that's something new. I believe that is, I don't see any other hands raised. I just thank you all so much for this enlivening discussion. I'm sure we're going to be continuing it. Please sign the pledge. And thank you again for your solidarity here, for your questions, your attention. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mia and Katie.